and continue to bless us as we make our Lenten journey. And we pray this in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. So hopefully everybody got a handout. And we are on week 5. Our theme for the entire Lent has been based on Nehemiah 2:18. Let us arise and build, so they strengthen their hands for the good work. This is the buzz verse we're using for our capital campaign, which we hope will conclude or come to a bigger completion by Palm Sunday. And so we set the scene every week. Chapter 2 of the Old Testament book of Nehemiah tells the story of the prophet Nehemiah approaching the king about rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. He uses courage, strategic planning, cooperation from the people, and reliance on God's favor in initiating this project. Building it back up was going to be a spiritual and emotional gift to the people, as well as a spiritual exercise. And Nehemiah announced the plan with faith, and the people followed with theirs. So we're doing a 6-week study, and this week we're examining the words, their hands, their hands. Have you ever looked at your hands and thought to yourself, my hands are created by God? We know that God has created us, but we don't really think necessarily about the parts of us. We don't think that God made my hands and God made my feet, and I'm supposed to do specific things with my hands and my feet that glorify God. We probably don't think like that. All of our parts are meant to work in sync, not only for us to live and to work, but for us to glorify God. So when we're using our hands as an example, our hands do not work independently from our brains. Our brain gives a signal to our hand, and our hand acts on whatever the brain is telling us to do. And it's, again, not only for work things, but for spiritual things. We read in Psalm 119, verse 73, your hands have made and fashioned me. Give me understanding that I may learn of your commandments. And, when we think about following God's commandments, we're thinking about in our minds, like, how do I interpret these things? But we should be thinking, like, how do I do these things with my hands? How do I use my hands to take the things that I've learned in my thoughts and execute them? The other thing is that Christianity is not just a religion of our hearts and our minds. It is a religion with our hands. Because if all we do in our Christianity is like understand a bunch of Bible trivia and we don't do anything with that, then we're not really acting in a Christian way, because Christianity is about serving. It's not only about loving God, but it's about serving others, and we serve others generally with our hands. We cook for them, we help them, we hold someone's hand and give them a hand up. We do things to help others, and we use our hands to do that. When we priests are serving the divine liturgy, we wear vestments that are called epimanikia, which means on the hands, or in English we just call them cuffs. And they go on our wrists, and we lace them up. And actually, you can tell I've had them on. I still have the line on my wrist, because when I put them on, and then it gets hot in the church, and your arms expand, you can see I still got lines on my elbows from them, on my arms from them. But these things, when you see them, and when I put them on, are supposed to remind us visually of the bound hands of Christ. And it's supposed to be a reminder, like, what are you doing with your hands? Like, because I'm a Christian, my hands are bound when it comes to looking at inappropriate things on the internet. Again, imagine if your hands are bound together. You're like, okay, I can't get to the mouse. Like, that reminds you, like, don't go to the mouse. If your hands are bound together, you can't, like, flip somebody off. It restricts your movement from the things that you're not supposed to be doing. So our hands are supposed to be free in order to serve, but they're supposed to be bound when it comes to sin. Our hands should glorify God in our vocation. Many people think about their vocation as like the thing that puts bread on the table, puts money in their bank account, but our hands should actually glorify God in our vocation. So if you're in the medical field, your hands take the place of God's hands in a healing way. Preparing a meal. I always kind of dog on certain restaurants where they talk about, you can lose weight, and it's like, well, I got a foot-long sandwich, you put like one slice of tomato on there. Of course, on my sandwich, like, would you eat that? During COVID, during the hurricane, when we didn't have power or refrigerator in our house, and our local Publix had power, we didn't, and we went over there and we got sandwiches one night, and this guy took like an eternity to make a sandwich, and he was so meticulous. but it looked so good when he got done. And I paused and said, I just want to thank you for making me something that I'm looking forward to eating. Because most people seem like they don't care while they're doing this, and you took such great care. I can't wait to get home and eat this, and thank you for being so careful with it. It's like not only you honor God, but you honor me. You make me feel good, and you make me feel encouraged about humanity just making a decent sandwich. Our hands can glorify God even if we're at a computer. Some people have jobs at computers where they're solitary. They don't interact with people, but they're inputting data as an example. I work with somebody not here, but I was working on a project with somebody, and they read the wrong line of a spreadsheet the other day, and then they made a phone call that they shouldn't have made, and they upset someone they shouldn't have upset, and it was just because of a careless error just reading a spreadsheet at a computer. So even things as insignificant you would think as typing on a computer by yourself in your home or your office, you can glorify God. I asked I may have said this at maybe the women's retreat, I said it somewhere, but at a recent Goya event, we asked them, like, what were the most important jobs in the world? And it's funny what the teens settled on. They didn't say doctor, lawyer, architect, engineer. They didn't even say priest. They said number one most important job is garbage collector, because if we don't have the garbage picked up, we're all going to die in a month. Next most important job is a truck driver, because the doctor can't really do anything without medical supplies that are delivered by a truck driver. No truck driver, no supplies, and also no food, because they deliver food to the stores. And the third most important career, according to our teens, is the farmer, because if we didn't have food to eat, we would. So you eliminate the garbage collector, the farmer, and the truck driver from our society, and you don't have a society. So of course, which parent says to their kid, I hope you grow up to be a truck driver? Like, of course not, we don't want that. We want to do something prestigious. But where would we be without these people? So the hand of the truck driver that's driving the truck across America, steering the wheel, like, they are giving life to us. And the hand of the garbage collector that's picking up the garbage can and smashing it into his car and hopefully not smashing it to pieces, those people, our life comes through them, because without them we would have no life. So have we ever considered that our hands stand in the place of God's hands? Just something to think about. Next thing I mentioned on here is that the hand executes the command of the brain and the desire of the heart. So our heart is important because that's what beats and keeps us alive. Our brain is where we process our thoughts and give commands to our hands and our feet and everything else. And the soul resides somewhere in the heart and in the mind. And so the things that we're convicted of, the things that we feel strongly about, those things are from our heart. They kind of ruminate and develop in our brain, and then they get executed by our hands. So if the desire of our heart is for something ungodly, let's say, and we have that kind of brewing in our heart, and we have it ruminating in our brain, and then it comes out off of our hands in a bad way. When we have something, I was talking to young adults a couple weeks ago, I'm talking about how to control our thoughts. And so if you have a thought that's like an unhealthy thought, like I want to go and steal something from the store across the street, if I just have a thought and I don't do anything with that thought, then you haven't committed a sin. But once you start moving with your hands and feet and walking across the street and putting your hands on the thing you want to steal, now you're crossing the line and you're moving into sin. The sin basically as a thought doesn't do anything, but our hand is what executes the sin. Even like looking at something inappropriate, you've got to flip, push a mouse, flip a remote control. Our hand is involved in executing just about every sin that there is. So we want to control our minds and control our thoughts so that our hands are controlled in a good way. In 1 Corinthians 12, 14 to 26, it's a long piece of scripture. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it talks about the body not consisting of one member but many. So if the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of a body. And if the ear should say, because I'm not the eye, I do not belong to the body. And so the gist of this is, we can't separate our body parts. If you cut your hand off from your body, you have just a hand, that hand is worth nothing because it's separate from everything else. And you can't just cut your foot off and say, well, I have a foot over here. But when all these things are put together, then they act interdependently, then the body executes things that glorify God, serve others, and bring joy to ourselves. There was a series that we watched many years ago, the men's group, and it's called The Truth Project. And it's for people who struggle with faith. We were trying to do this as an exercise to bolster our faith, and there was like 12 different presentations. They're about an hour each, and they come from all the academic disciplines. So they had one on anthropology, they had one on biology, et cetera, and they attack faith, they examine faith, not attack, they examine faith from a bunch of different academic disciplines. And my favorite one was actually the biology one, and I'm not really a science guy, but one of the things that I loved about that was it talked about when you get something as simple as a paper cut, 200 things happen in your body, 200 things to stop the flow of blood on a paper cut. So imagine like something really serious happens, how many things in your body fire off to deal with that body emergency? And so it says it points to the presence of a creator, because how could any of us design something so complex like a human body that has 200 things fire off just for a paper cut? So everything in our bodies works interdependently. Jesus says in Matthew 6:21, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." It doesn't say where your heart is, there your treasure goes. It actually does it the other way around. So the things that we treasure the most, and that might be our money, it might be our time, it might be sports, it might be God, but whatever we treasure the most, our heart follows there. And a lot of our treasure is affected by our hands. In Matthew 15, verse 18, Jesus says, "What comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart," I have a typo there, "and this defiles a man." So it's not even what comes out of the brain that messes us up, because the brain itself doesn't act, it thinks, and it tells the body to act. So if we can get to a place where we stop thoughts in our brain so that they don't come out of our mouth or with our hands, that's why we pray, to control our thoughts. But when we have good thoughts that are coming out of our brain, godly thoughts, then our hands follow and they act accordingly. For those of us who have children, I remember when Nicholas was like in preschool, and they handed us like the parent's manual, and it said, "Hands are for helping, not for hitting." Or hurting, and so when we think about, like, my hand is a tool that I can use to help people, I can also use to hurt people. I can physically take someone and hit them. I could take a weapon and hurt somebody. I could raise my fist in anger at somebody. But this is the same hand that I can use to bind up somebody's wound. I can use to hug somebody. I can use to pat somebody on the back. I mean, so it's a great tool for healing and for encouragement. It's also a weapon of destruction. And so we want to control our hands. There's a beautiful prayer, which is Psalm 26, verse 6 to 12, that priests offer before the liturgy. It talks about, "I will wash my hands in innocence and stand before a holy altar. I will listen to the voice of your praise and declare all your wonders. Lord, I have loved the beauty of your house, the place where your glory abides. Destroy not my soul with sinners, nor my life with men of blood in whose hands are transgressions. The right hand is full of bribes. But as for me, Lord, I walked in innocence. Redeem me, O Lord, and have mercy upon me. My foot is set upon the straight path, and in the assemblies of the Lord I will bless you." That's what the prayer says. It's a paraphrase of Psalm 26. But the idea of washing our hands, not only to clean them, but to wash our hands, and by extension to wash our brains, and to wash our hands to clean them from the desire to do inactivity, is really metaphorically important. The last thing, actually, when the priest puts his vestments on, the very last thing he does, once he's all dressed and ready to go, is that he washes his hands. That's actually the last prayer of the vesting prayers. So before we go to battle, it's like, let me get my hands clean, so that with clean hands, even if my mind has a bad thought, my clean hands will override the messed up mind. Another cool thing about this prayer is it takes about 30 seconds to say it. I remember during COVID, when everyone was obsessed with washing their hands, I'm like, put this prayer on your bathroom mirror, and then when you're washing your hands, offer this prayer, and by the time you're done offering it, 30 seconds will have gone by, and you will have washed your hands, because you cannot do this prayer in the 5 seconds that it takes most of our kids to, like, wash their hands. Like, turn on the water, like, okay, good enough, like, did you pick up any soap? Did you, like, wipe it around? So if you want to wash your hands well, that's a great prayer to offer. There is virtue in working with our hands, and one of the things that Christianity is coming under fire for, and probably rightfully so, is that every time there's some kind of a crisis, like the hurricane or fires or whatever, people are like, we're sending our thoughts and prayers. And it's like, well, we got to send more than thoughts and prayers. We have to have actions. Last weekend, I happened to be in California for something, and I got to see my brother, and my brother lives in Altadena, which is where all the fires were. That was the flashpoint of the fires. So we drove around Altadena, and I took some video. If you want to see it, I'll be happy to show it to you. But like miles and miles. I mean, we would drive down street after street. This wasn't the mountain burning down. I mean, the whole mountains over LA are burned. There's not a green thing on them. But like, we're talking about neighborhoods. Just house after house after house just destroyed. And there were some random houses destroyed. There were houses where like an ember flew 5 houses and hit this one. And so like there might be a house where there's one house destroyed and then 5 houses on either side are fine. And just like a flying, tree branch landed on the roof and just, and he said that there were like 5,000 houses burning at the same time and like 200 fire trucks to service, that area. In fact, he told me that the Palisades fire, which started first, all the extra apparatus from Pasadena and Altadena went out to the Palisades, so that when the Pasadena fire started, there was like very minimal fire equipment right in Altadena. And he actually told me that they had apparatus from Whittier, our hometown, that was like up there because everything was just stretched and they just let things go. And my thought with my point with that is that thoughts and prayers are one thing, sending some money out there is one thing, but you look at people that were out there just with shovels, just shoveling debris, and this is a couple months after this happened. I mean, we go out for a ride on a Friday afternoon or Sunday afternoon, and people are just out there just like cleaning up, and it's like you wish you could just pick up a shovel and like go with them. So we need to use our hands in order to put our faith in action. Again, we have to reconcile how we use our hands. The same hands that offer a hug can be used for destruction. Same thing with our mouths. But we want to reconcile how we're using our hands. In worship, we use all of our senses. We see things, we hear things, we smell things, we taste things, and we touch things. But we see hands displayed prominently in the service. And the most prominent way is probably when the priest is blessing us. And every time the priest is offering a blessing, if you haven't taken the Orthodox 101 class, if you look at an icon of Christ, on one side you see the letter I, C, and on the other side you see XC. So the IC stands for Jesus, and the XC stands for Christos, Christ. And every time a priest is offering a blessing, he is doing it in the name of Christ with his fingers in that posture. So my index finger is the I, my middle finger and thumb is the C, my ring finger and thumb makes the X, and my pinky makes the C. So it's a blessing in the name of Christ. We don't just come out and say, you're all blessed. It's a blessing in the name of Christ. If you look at the male saints in our church, just about all of them have their hands like this because they're offering a blessing over us in the name of Christ. Little trivia fact, which saint in the church does not have their hand like this? Anyone know? There's one saint that does not have his hand like this. What? John the Baptist, our saint. John the Baptist has his hand like this, and it's because he's the forerunner. So he is not blessing in the name of Christ. His job is the forerunner, so his hand is like this, pointing over his shoulder, like the one that's coming after me, that is the Christ. But if you look at the icons on the pulpit as an example, it's Jesus and the 3 hierarchs, and they all have their hands like this. The women saints generally hold in their hands some kind of instrument that they would be using. So for instance, some of them hold the Bible because they were out teaching. Some of them, like St. Paraskevi, I'm looking at Skip, was one of our healing saints. So she has like a medicine box. So she's not holding a Bible, but generally the women are holding the instruments of what they were doing and how they were actually using their hands. Ironically, the men, their symbol is in place of Christ and more like theology. The women actually have the hands in the icons in some kind of action. Anyway, kind of irony there. We are supposed to raise our hands when the priest says, "Let us lift up our hearts." That's a sign of surrender. So when you say, "I surrender to you, Lord, I give myself to you this week, I give my life to you," and we're supposed to be imitating that and raising our hands as well. When you kneel, and especially in the context of confession, but sometimes in other contexts also, when the priest is like, I did a chrismation tonight and someone knelt and I put the stole over their head and I put my hand on top of that, that's significant that the stole goes on your head and my hand goes on top of that as opposed to like on your flesh. And that is to reinforce that my hand unworthily represents the hand of God. It's not my hand, but an unworthy representation of his. The stole is a sign of priestly authority, so the authority of the priest goes on the head of the person, and the authority of the priest is actually given by God, not by ourselves. And then the hand of the priest goes on top of basically the symbol of God. That's why if you have a priest who's like imperfect, which we all are, I'm not going to put my imperfect hand and try to do God's work with my imperfect hand, but I'm going to take the perfect instrument of God's grace and put my imperfect hand on top of that. And finally, the last comment about hands is that the place where we want to be at the end of our life is at the right hand of God. There was I've told this story a few times, but it's been a while since I've said it here. One of my camp priests years ago, Father Dean Jajikos from Orlando, gave this speech called Then What? And I love going to camp because, among other things, I can rip off sermons from other priests that I hear. And so he talked about a young man who was about to graduate from college and went to his priest sort of anxious about, what was going to happen next. And he goes, well, what do you want to happen next? And he goes, well, I want to graduate college and I want to get a good job. And he goes, okay, and then what? He goes, well, I guess I want to get married. Then what? I want to have kids. Then what? I want to excel in my field. Then what? I want to make a lot of money. Then what? I guess I'm going to retire, travel the world. Then what? He goes, I don't know. At some point I'm going to get sick. And he goes, and then what? He goes, well, eventually I'm going to die. And then the priest says, and then what? So at some point we're going to run out of then whats, and we're going to take our last breath, and then what? If we don't have God, then all the things that preceded that will have gone for naught. I did a retreat last week with some people who are very generous in their contribution and in their lifestyle, and I said, no matter how much money you have, at the end of life, we're all equally dead. So, we cannot take the things that are in our pockets. We can take the works that our hands have done, and we can take the faith that's in our heart. But at the end of life, the goal is to sit at the right hand of God. So imagine that we will all see God. We will all see God in his glory, and we will see his hands spread out to welcome. And he's going to designate some people and say, you are going to come on this side. He's going to designate some people and say, you are going to come on this side. But we will all see God, and we want to end up on the right hand. That's where we want to be. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25, we read about the last judgment, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him. Then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep at his right hand and the goats on the left. And the king will say to those at his right hand, come, O blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. And our salvation there will be based on 6 things, all of which have to do with our hands, not our minds. I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty, you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison, you came to me. All those things have nothing to do with what's in our head. They have to do what we did with our hands and our feet. So when you think about what's the most important part of the human body, obviously it's the heart, because we're beating with our heart, no life. Our brain controls the thoughts. But if that's all that matters, if we don't do anything with those thoughts, then our life is meaningless. So our hands are a close third. We need a heart to beat. We need a brain to think, but we need hands to do things. And our salvation is based a lot on what we do with what we've been given. So that is our presentation on hands. I have 6 questions tonight that hopefully you can discuss at your table. How can you use your hands? How can your hands, represent the hands of God in your vocation/family? What specific things do you do with your hands that can honor God? Next question, can you think of an example of how your heart, brain, and hands work together to do things that are unique to you and your life? Number 3, if hands are for helping, why is doing destructive things with our hands so attractive? 4, has technology helped or hurt how we use our hands for helping others, and why? Number 5, worship is supposed to be an experience of all of the senses. We're supposed to work as we are worshiping. What keeps you from having a full experience of worship? Or if you feel you worship to the fullest extent possible, what is it that motivates you to do that? And finally, how often does our judgment before God enter into our thoughts? What brings it to our minds? And what keeps us from thinking about it if we're not thinking about it? Why are we not thinking about it? So that's that. It's 8:15. We'll spend about 25 minutes on this. If you have questions that come up from your table, I'll take them at the end, and then we'll say a prayer, and we will be out of here. So please take a few minutes, and please talk this over with the people at your table.